It's Diddy season, everyone, and everyone is saying everything and anything they know about the troubled music executive. Now it's the turn of Clive Davis, another industry giant, and whatever the mogul has on Diddy is downright shocking. Reportedly, Clive Davis and Diddy were once lovers, and there are receipts to all these. One person who claims to know the truth about the two music executives is the ever-controversial but truthful Suge Knight. Knight's Prison podcast has already brought about countless shocking claims, including a recent unexpected allegation about Diddy and Clive Davis. In a new episode of Collect Call with Suge Knight, the former death row boss recalled Jimmy Iovine making a bombshell revelation during a meeting at Interscope. Apparently, he wasn't supposed to hear the explosive news, but he decided to share it with him anyway. "We are in the office, in the Westwood Interscope office," Knight began. "I walked into Jimmy's office. I didn't have to knock on the door. We were having a conversation, and he overheard somebody say something he probably shouldn't have heard." He continues. He said, "I'm here because Clive Davis told me that him and Puffy's real tight and, lovers. So I thought he was talking like they got love for each other." I'm like, 8. He said, "Nah, they are lovers." He continued. And I'm like, "Why do you keep saying that?" I said, "Are they lovers like F-kin and S-kin?" And he said, "I don't want to say that, but that's what that means, right?" Knight's claims are unconfirmed, but this is far from the first time Diddy's been accused of having a romantic relationship with a fellow male celebrity. It's also far from the first time Suge Knight has accused other male celebrities of secretly hooking up. In February, for example, he alleged that Andre Harrell and Russell Simmons once had a romantic relationship. "They might not want to say it, but they know they were lovers," he claimed. "They participated in those types of things." Now, once again, a person has the right to be whatever they want to be, but own it. And to know just how close Diddy and Davis are, rumor has it that despite all the ongoing cases against him, Diddy still made it to the list of invitees in the annual Clive Davis pre-Grammy bash. A source familiar with the guest list told Page 6, "Puffy is perennially invited to the party. He's always on the list." An eagle-eyed source noticed Diddy wasn't prominently featured in a photo montage from the party that is typically included on Davis's annual invitation. The digital invite featured no less than 3 photos of the Bad Boy Records founder last year. But this year, guests barely saw a glimpse of him in one pic behind Jay-Z and Beyoncé from the 2020 party when he was honored. The invitation lacked as many Diddy pics as in the past, sparking speculation he was scrubbed from it. But a rep for Davis revealed it was all much ado about nothing. Puffy wasn't scrubbed, they said. Each year, the photos included in the pre-Grammy Gala invitation are updated. Different artists, guests, and performers are changed from year to year. The troubled musician is nominated in the Best Progressive R&B Album category for his latest project, the love album Off the Grid, at this year's Grammys. In a past episode of the Rock and Roll High School podcast with Pete Ganbarg, legendary music executive Clive Davis shared a story about how a young Sean Diddy Combs convinced him of the merits of hip-hop music. "Puffy was 23 years old, and I knew the artists that I had. Aretha, Dion, Whitney was one kind of music," Davis says. LaFace ushered in blue-collared R&B at its height, but sensing the hip-hop revolution, both L.A. Reid and I agreed that we could use someone really attuned to the street. "You gotta know what you can do for yourself, and you gotta know when you need to look to other people," he explained. Diddy was then still an ambitious young record man who'd come up under Andre Harrell at Uptown Records. In teaming with Davis, Sean "Puffy" Combs would soon launch his own Bad Boy Entertainment imprint. And I said, "What have you got to illustrate that point?" And he played me Craig Mack's "Flava in Your Ear," and he played me the then unknown artist that he felt and believed so strongly. He played me 4 or 5 cuts from Notorious Big, Clive Davis remembers of their meeting. Davis was convinced and connected the young, soon-to-be mogul to industry executives. I said, "Okay, you proved your point." That's when I introduced him to the weekly, what we called singles meetings, Davis adds. I introduced him to an executive there as someone who would help lead us to the street and share in the forthcoming hip-hop revolution. Since then, the two have been as thick as thieves, but of course not without controversies. One came as recently as 2022 from a man who is well known both to Diddy and Clive. After Diddy made a speech about the Grammys and how the Academy has failed to fully recognize R&B and hip-hop throughout the years, Mace took to Instagram to vent about his place in the music industry. He claims to have undergone an unjust situation with Diddy, who initially denied Mace's offer to pay $2 million for his publishing. He reveals that Sean Combs completely refused to sell back his masters. He took to Instagram to explain the matter, saying that the mogul wouldn't accept his offer despite only receiving $20,000 in total for his music. music because Puffy has a horrendous business model. I heard your Grammy speech about how you are now for the artist and about how the artist must take back control. So I will be the first to take that initiative. Also, before we ask other ethnicities to do us right, we should do us as Black people better, especially the creators, he said. I heard you loud and clear when you said that you are now for the artist. And to that, my response is if you want to see change, you can make a change today by starting with yourself. He continued calling out the media vet on social media, saying, "You bought it for about $20K, and I offered you $2 million in cash. This is not Black excellence at all, when our own race is enslaving us. If it's about us owning, it can't be about us owning each other. No more hiding behind love. You changed? Give the artists back their money, so they can take care of their families." Diddy was honored at Clive Davis's pre-Grammys gala with the 2020 Grammy Salute to Industry Icons Awards, where he made a speech addressing the Recording Academy's lack of acknowledgement for hip-hop and R&B music. He said in the speech, "In the great words of Erykah Badu, we are artists and we are sensitive about our S. We are passionate. For most of us, this is all we got. This is our only hope. Truth be told, hip-hop has never been respected by the Grammys. Black music has never been respected by the Grammys to the point that it should be." Ironically enough, Mace performed in honor of Diddy at the Clive Davis pre-Grammys affair, and it's not hard to see why. Davis is a legend in the music business. Before meeting Diddy, he was a man on his own and played a role both in making and breaking one of the biggest voices of our generation, Whitney Houston, just like Diddy messed up several artists he signed. Clive signed Janis Joplin in 1967, turned Barry Manilow into a star in 1975, and orchestrated the reinvention of Aretha Franklin in 1980. But his relationship with the late singer Whitney Houston cemented his reputation as a first-rate hitmaker and packager of talent. The albums she released between 1985 and 1998 contained 11 Billboard #1 hits and sold over 50 million copies in the United States. More than serving simply as a label head, Clive Davis matched Whitney with songs, played MC at her events, and extolled her supremacy over Mariah Carey. From 1967 to 1973, he headed Columbia Records, which he helped transform into the biggest label of the rock era. He signed Joplin, Santana, and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. He pushed into R&B and disco via a promotion and distribution deal with Philadelphia International, home to the OJs, Harold Melvin, and the Blue Notes. Then he was fired over expense account violations that included an $18,000 charge to the company for the bar mitzvah of his son. He maintains he did nothing wrong. Determined to rebuild his reputation, Davis started Arista, where he signed Patti Smith, Lou Reed, and Dionne Warwick. His first queen at the label was Melissa Manchester, a talented singer-songwriter who came to him hoping to write serious, contemplative songs. They had big hits together, but she also learned the cost of having an executive so focused on the marketplace. "We could not find a comfortable way to communicate," Manchester said. "He always wanted me to be current, and I always wanted to be timeless. It's a different way of looking at the same picture." Another star from that era, Barry Manilow, left Davis after conflict over his artistic persona, but not before the thorny issue of his homosexuality was handled with a story that he was living with a production assistant, Linda Allen. He came back when his first album without Davis bombed. "There's this eternal argument between the part of us that wants to be an artist and the part of us that wants to be a success," said Carly Simon, an Arista artist. "The success part often wins." Davis never liked being called a Svengali by Whitney Houston. He thought that sounded slithery, but how else to describe their relationship? 2 weeks after Davis signed her, he went on the Merv Griffin show and introduced his protege to the world. She hadn't recorded a song yet, but that was how much he believed in her. Also, he loved going on television. In 1985, the Whitney Houston album was released and sold 15 million copies in the United States alone. She won a Grammy in the pop category for Saving All My Love for You, but lost in the R&B category for You Give Good Love, a clear indication of the success of the appeal to white audiences. Carly Simon said, "He is on the side of the winner at all costs, and the cost can be very high. The cost can be somebody's career or somebody's innateness." In 1987, Whitney's follow-up album arrived, and 4 singles all hit #1, making her the first artist in history with 7 consecutive chart toppers. I said, "Whitney, are you pinching yourself?" And she said, "Yeah, Clive, I'm pinching myself," Davis said. It's a story he loves to tell, but the tale was abbreviated. The reviews for the follow-up album were brutal. Over and over, she was treated like a Hallmark card with lungs. Behind the scenes, Whitney was increasingly under pressure from a family that depended upon her and whose appetites seemed to be nearly bottomless. She made her father her manager and bought her mother a new house. They had divorced after their daughter became famous. In the late 1980s, her brother Michael taught her how to freebase cocaine. Whitney's friend Robin Crawford went to Sissy Houston's house to say there was a problem. Sissy Houston had issues with the idea her daughter was gay. She wasn't open to staging an intervention with Crawford and decided to deal with her daughter's problem on her own. Davis seemed equally disinclined to address Whitney's sexuality or what effect hiding that might have had on her happiness or psychological health, most probably because he was gay himself. In fact, he said he had no idea whether she was gay. "We never discussed it," he said, going on to list the romances she'd supposedly had in the 80s with Jermaine Jackson and Eddie Murphy. "Oh, nonsense," said Frederick Dannon, author of Hitmen, Power Brokers, and Fast Money Inside the Music Business. Clive didn't know? Of course he knew. Davis said that any implication he orchestrated a cover-up around Whitney's sexuality or did not want her to be herself was crazy. In April 1989, the singer and alleged lover Crawford attended the Soul Train Awards in Los Angeles. When Whitney's name was announced among the nominees for Best R&B Urban Contemporary Single Female, a loud booing could be heard in the audience. "I was there," said producer Kenny Edmonds, known as Babyface. "We talked about it because we were all a little shocked. She was very upset." That night, Whitney met Bobby Brown for the first time. They flirted, and she invited him to her 26th birthday party in New Jersey. She and Davis also hired Babyface and his partner Louisiana Reed to work on her third album, I'm Your Baby Tonight. The irony is that if she was trying to go blacker, I don't know that we were the guys to go to, Babyface said. "We were in the middle, but maybe that's why Clive called us in the first place." 3 years later, she and Brown were married. The morning of the wedding, the groom walked into the bedroom of his bride-to-be, he writes in his book, hoping for a quickie. When he found her hunched over a bureau, doing a line of coke, he couldn't believe his luck. She was classy and street at the same time, he says in his memoir. So, he bent over and joined in. By now, Whitney was promoting what would become her biggest commercial vehicle yet, The Bodyguard, a demographic pandering movie she'd just filmed with Kevin Costner. Even the wedding to Brown became part of the film's promotion plan, as the singer submitted with Crawford to interviews in which they explained that they had not been lovers, but were simply best friends. "I think once she's married, she'll feel a lot more complete," Crawford said. Crawford remained part of the management team for 7 years, locked with Brown in what several people in Whitney Can I Be Me describe as a battle for Whitney's affections. During that time, Davis receded somewhat from the picture. The singer starred in films that grappled more directly with African American issues, but descended further into her own addiction. She suffered an overdose during the making of the 1995 film Waiting to Exhale. Then she pulled out of big promotional appearances for The Preacher's Wife because of throat issues. In 1997, Davis's patience ran out. He wrote her a letter telling her it was time for her to come back to work. Soon enough, Whitney was back in the studio working on My Love Is Your Love. This album burst with collaborations with edgy producers like Missy Elliott, Lauryn Hill, Wyclef Jean, and Rodney Jerkins. It got some of the best reviews of her career, but the tour was another story. The problem wasn't the voice, but her marriage's increasingly Mr. and Mrs. Smith-like quality. The situation finally broke Crawford, who determined it was time to quit the family business. She also eventually settled down with Lisa Hintelman, a former magazine editor who works as the director of talent and entertainment partnerships at Audible. Afterward, said Whitney's former bodyguard, David Roberts, speaking in Whitney, "Can I Be Me?" The singer seemed to descend further. In March 2000, the Grammy winner pulled out of a performance for Davis at his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. A few weeks later, she began singing the wrong song during an Oscars rehearsal and couldn't stay on key. She was fired. This was around the time Davis said he realized Whitney had a drug problem. She told him that she had it under control, that it was her business. Her 2002 album, made after Davis left Arista to start the new label, J, tanked. She gave a disastrous interview to Diane Sawyer in which Whitney explained, in a moment that became notorious, that she did not smoke crack. "Crack is cheap," she said. "I make too much money to ever smoke crack." They did reunite for her last album, and she got divorced. But the combination of cocaine and years of smoking had taken a toll. With her fortune diminishing and her family ever dependent on her, she agreed to stage a tour. It was a disaster. As far as Davis knew, Whitney was sober for the next 2 years. She seemed to be in good physical shape in February 2012, the week of the Grammys. They met at his bungalow at the Beverly Hills Hotel. She said she'd been swimming at least an hour a day and would be ready to go into the studio in August. Then Whitney went out to a nightclub with her daughter, Bobby Christina Brown, and left it bleeding. The night she died, the police removed piles of empty liquor bottles and prescription drugs from her hotel room. Davis did memorialize her at his Grammy event, bringing Alicia Keys and Whitney to the stage to perform songs the singer had made famous, and he went to Newark, New Jersey, for Whitney's funeral. In his eulogy, he rattled off all the record-breaking statistics of their 27-year collaboration, name-checking 5 of her 11 #1 songs, 5 more top 10 hits, 4 of her movies, and 1 very famous rendition of The Star-Spangled Banner. Yet again, but not for the last time, he told the story about how he'd asked her in 1987 whether she was pinching herself at her success. Crawford didn't speak that day. Instead, she posted a remembrance on Esquire's website. A lot was left out, but she did give her diagnosis for what happened to Whitney Houston. The record company, the band members, her family, her friends. She fed everybody, she wrote. Deep down inside, that's what made her tired. Many people believe Clive and Diddy were able to curve chemistry because the two pretty much have a similar story. Clive was born in Brooklyn in 1932 to a middle-class Jewish family. His dad was an electrician and salesman, and his mom was a stay-at-home wife. In his teenage years, he lost his parents in quick succession and was left with no money. As a result, he moved in with his sister in Queens, New York. After finishing school, he received a scholarship to study at New York University at the College of Arts and Sciences, from which he graduated with a degree in political science, magna cum laude, at the age of 21. He then received a scholarship to study law at Harvard, from which he graduated in 1956 at the age of 24. His first job out of university was in a small law firm called Rosenman, Collin, Kay, Petchek, and Freund. One of the company's clients was CBS Records. Clive became closely associated with the client. When one of the partners left the company, he hired Clive to handle one of CBS Records' subsidiary labels, Columbia Records. He was originally hired as assistant counsel, but within a year, he was made general counsel for the label. He was only 28 years old at the time. In 1965, the company was restructured, and Clive was made administrative vice president and general manager of Columbia. A year later, CBS restructured all its recorded music units into one group called Columbia CBS. Clive was then made the president of recording for CBS and this new unit, which became known simply as Columbia. As president of the label, he became very interested in the trending genres in the music business, rock and roll and folk music. At the company, he signed some of the most significant talent of the 1960s and 1970s. One of the first people he signed was the folk legend Donovan. After being urged by a friend to attend the Monterey Pop Festival, he discovered and signed Janis Joplin and her band, the Big Brother Holding Company. He went on to sign Bruce Springsteen, Santana, Chicago, Billy Joel, Blood, Sweat and Tears, The Grateful Dead, Earth, Wind and Fire, and Aerosmith, to name but a few. With these signings, Columbia doubled their income. He was eventually fired from Columbia in 1973, 13 years after he had initially been employed at the company for misappropriating company funds to pay for his son's bar mitzvah. Charges for which little evidence was found, and many say he was dismissed for political reasons, linking CBS to the New York Mafia. This did not, however, prevent Columbia Pictures, a company not linked to Columbia Records, from affording him the opportunity to head up their music division. Motion picture companies usually consist of music divisions that assist in facilitating the use of music in the content they create. After writing his biography, he used money given to him by Columbia Pictures to restructure one of the company's record labels, Bell Records, and start his own recording label, Arista Records, in 1974. He got the name for the company from the Honor Society, which he was a part of at NYU. He later went on to found a music division at NYU called the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music in 2003. Besides being a master of identifying and breaking in new talent, Clive is also very good at analyzing the careers of already established artists and determining ways to reinvigorate them. At Arista, he reinvigorated Aretha Franklin, Dionne Warwick, and Santana's careers, bringing their music to whole new generations of music listeners. One of Arista Records' first major stars was Barry Manilow, who had a #1 hit single soon after the launch of the company with Mandy. Some of the other early signings included Carly Simon and Eric Carmen, along with the Grateful Dead, Patti Smith, and Air Supply. While the earlier part of his career was dominated by pop, rock, and folk signings, the 1980s and 1990s were dominated by R&B and hip-hop signings. Arista became the go-to label for R&B music at this time. After signing a mega deal with prolific R&B producers L.A. Reid and Babyface, in which they started their own subsidiary of Arista, LaFace Records, many of the top R&B talent resided on the Arista roster: Toni Braxton, Usher, Outkast, Pink, and TLC. The company's dominance of the urban music market was further cemented when Clive signed a deal with Diddy, whereby he started his own subsidiary, Arista Bad Boy Records. Diddy brought Notorious Big, Faith Evans, Mace, and 112 on board the Arista freight train. But from then, their long sidekick relationship began. This R&B revolution commenced with the signing of Whitney Houston in 1983. After being persuaded to go watch the young singer and model perform at a New York nightclub, Clive was sold. He took it upon himself to mentor the young girl and stage manage her career, knowing he could make her an international superstar. The amazing thing was that Clive sold R&B music, which is a very niche product, to a predominantly white audience in the United States, and eventually made the world fall in love with the genre. As with Berry Gordy before him, he was highly criticized by R&B purists for whitewashing the sound of the genre. Whitney became the crown jewel in the Clive Davis multiverse. She would go on to become one of the biggest selling female artists of all time, selling over 200 million records in her career. Whitney aside, in the 1990s, Clive signed one of the most successful Swedish acts since ABBA, Ace of Base. The band dominated the charts in the mid-1990s with songs such as The Sign, All That She Wants, Wheel of Fortune, Lucky Love, and Happy Nation. The band went on to sell over 50 million records internationally. At the same time, Clive decided to explore country music and opened a Nashville division of Arista in order to use the same magic he had used on R&B talent to promote and push country talent. He signed Brooks and Dunn, Alan Jackson, Brad Paisley, and Pam Tillis. But unlike Diddy, Clive actually cared for his artists and made sure they were well compensated. That, of course, cannot be said of Diddy. Almost every artist he signed, if not all, complained of one thing or the other, but he didn't care anyway. So now, things have come full circle, and he finds himself in a spot where those he mistreated would have at least helped him, but they can't. Sorry, they don't want to. In fact, they are enjoying his fall from grace. Poor Diddy. And that's it from us today. Until next time. Thank you for watching.